Your legacy is your proclamation of difference. It's the tangible asset that we all possess, which allows us to put our collective thumbs on the scale of progress. The individuality of such a proclamation of a statement is important because it gives us ownership of the foundation in which we want to pour and leave for the rest of our lives. In a sense, our legacies are representative of how we want to be perceived as leaders. According to a 2023 Gallup study, it found only 10% of the worldwide population is natural leaders, while 20% of us possess leadership traits. And with some training and guidance, they can ultimately blossom into natural leaders. It's important to note that this particular study was focused primarily on corporate leadership. That's good news for my friend George Hayworth. He was commissioned into the U.S. Army to serve as a second lieutenant, to serve as a field artillery officer. He served 4.5 years in the service as a part of the 101st Airborne Division, deploying once to Afghanistan from 2012 to 2013. He's got experience leading teams ranging from 30 to 300 in the military. He reached the rank of captain before leaving the military in June of 2016. Since then, he's worked in corporate America. He's also continued to serve in the Tennessee Army National Guard as an engineer officer. He's the founder and CEO of Elite Sentinel Coaching, where they have a mission of forging leaders and building legacies. He trains men in authentic masculinity to become the men they were born to be. Through his program, he gives men the tools to become better men in every aspect of their lives, including their marriages, relationships, as fathers, and so much more. And Hayworth joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Absolutely. So, George, if you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend. And I'm super excited to talk to you all about men's leadership and mental health this morning. Great to see you this morning, and happy Friday to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. No. George, just before we dive into what makes you so special, my friend, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the importance of men's mental health because, June is National Men's Mental Health Month, my friend, and I wanted to know how important is it do you think men have to be in touch with their mental health, my friend? How important do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things and one of the biggest challenges our society faces today. Men are typically very isolated in our modern age. We go to work, we come home, we don't really have any close friends in general. There's a study out there that shows that over 70% of men don't have a single close friend. And you want to talk about men's mental health? Well, not being connected to other men and having actual friend groups and brotherhood to rely upon, that's going to amplify the issues of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideations. So when it comes to men's mental health, I honestly think we have ourselves to blame in a lot of ways. We can point fingers in other directions, but in order to actually change this, men need to stop the act and we need to start connecting with each other and being honest with each other about where we really are, what we're really struggling with, and then actually be there to support each other. I think most men would find it odd to say to a close friend, I love you, man. Well, I am surrounded by guys that I say, I love you all the time. And when that becomes your norm, things like being stressed out about work or your kids or your family get a lot less intense because you start to have actual connections that support you. So it's a huge problem, men's mental health. We need to address that. But honestly, men need to start taking ownership for themselves. And you need to start connecting with other men in similar walks of life with you who are kind of there to understand and be with you alongside you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, my friend, your commitment to forging leaders and building legacies, my friend, I know that's your mission in life, my friend. So tell me, why is that so important to you, and why is it important for men to stand in a space of leadership? Tell me more, buddy.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, the reason it's so important to me is because I was not this guy, right? I did struggle. I wasn't leading my family well. I wasn't loving them well. I wasn't growing into the man that I was actually proud of. In brutal honesty, I was a teenager pretending to be a man, right? I was still stuck emotionally as a 16-year-old, and I was trying to go through life and prove to everyone that I was a man now, right? Well, that's not a leader. That's an act. And most men, I think, are struggling today because deep down they're terrified that they're going to be found out, right? That they are a fraud or they're not good enough. And some of these things are natural, right? We always want to like see where we stack up in the pecking order, so to speak. But a lot of it is not useful. And a lot of it is just lies to ourselves. But the reason I think men are need to step up as leaders and why it's so important to me is because when men lead, it's a blessing to everyone, right? When they take ownership of themselves, you have to improve yourself first before you can actually lead others. You have to have a plan and a direction and have to be someone worth following, right? So you have to inherently become a better person first. So that benefits the man, but then everyone that they serve through their leadership, they provide a gift and they take burdens off of others. So very long story short, when men step into the role of leadership, whether it's in business, in their families, in their friend groups, any organization that they're serving with, they provide a service to others, right? And it is a blessing to everyone who benefits from it. So great leaders, great men who love others and have empathy for them provide a valuable service to our society. And so the more that men start doing that, the more we will start fixing a lot of these problems. And especially when you get back into the home, when men are leading in the homes, they raise stronger children into functioning adults in our society. They have stronger marriages that can withstand the hardships of life. And they're going to connect with other people better and have a more awareness on how to help others.
Yeah, George, I want to dive into the whole concept of building relationships because,
Mhm.
in my view, it's the heartbeat of making progress in life. And no matter how many degrees you have on a wall or how many years you went to school, buddy, it's my belief that you can always learn something from somebody else. So tell me about the importance of building relationships and how important that is to progress, my friend.
Great question, and this is one I'm really fired up about. I love how you said that. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have or whatever your title is, you can certainly learn from everyone. I'm a former military guy, active duty. I'm in the National Guard now. I've learned things from my youngest soldiers. I've learned things from junior soldiers who have taught me a great skill or a great way of doing something, right? And that takes some humility, right? It doesn't matter what my title is. I can learn from this person. So I love that point you made. That's so good. Emotional intelligence and building relationships. These are probably some of the most underutilized tools that men have. And I'm going to pull back one step first before we really answer that question. The word for man in the original, like Greek, I think, or Hebrew, means to pierce and to initiate. So men are supposed to cover ground. We are supposed to, when it comes to relationships, we are supposed to make the first moves. And this isn't just intimate relationships. This is also with friends, with coworkers, with your children, any relationship. It's our job to be the one to cover the ground first, to open the door to relationship. Well, there's some key requirements there first, right? In order to actually build relationship with someone, you have to, one, care about them. You have to have empathy to understand where are they really in their walk in life? How can I actually help them? What are they feeling right now? Now, when we talk about masculinity, things like emotional intelligence and compassion and empathy don't necessarily come first to mind. However, the strongest men I know, the most successful men I know, build relationships everywhere. They don't burn bridges, they build connection. And that requires a great deal of emotional intelligence, empathy, and understanding. And when we do these things habitually, we become a pillar of protection for other people. They will want to naturally gravitate towards you because they're going to feel safe. They're going to understand that, hey, this is a guy that actually cares about who I am as a person. Okay, now let's just play that out a little bit. In your family, how much good is that going to do inside your home? If your wife and children feel safe around you, guess what? They're going to feel a lot more protected from the world. They're going to be more able to perform at a higher level. Same thing in business. If you have a bunch of people working under you and you provide that environment where they feel safe and protected by your presence, then they are going to want to work harder for you and for the business and achieve better outcomes. So it's a huge requirement for men, and I think we've really neglected this. We've thought that all we're good for is to go make a paycheck, build the house and call it good there. No, you're really missing the point. I don't care what your job is, how much money you make, how many cars you have. Those things don't matter. What really matters is the strength of your relationship. So the people that I look up to the most and respect the most has nothing to do with what they've done, business wise or accomplishments or any of that kind of stuff. It's the strength of their relationships. When you look at a man's wife, and if she is just doting on him and enamored by him, you can tell that this man has planted the seeds of a very strong relationship through years of hard work and understanding and compassion. And that's something you can't just get, right? Money can't just buy that. So those are the types of men that I look up to. And so we should aspire to be more like that, because those are really the things that are going to stand the test of time. And we get into things like legacy, right? Okay, great. Maybe you build great companies. Maybe you can do some good in the world that way. Those are good things. However, the biggest legacy, the most impressive legacy any man can make is, one, with his family, building strong relationship with his family, building them up to have their own lives that makes an impact way beyond the family, and then extending that outward to external relationships and the way that you foster growth in other people so that long after you're gone, their families are living better lives because of the contribution you made. So all of that starts with building relationship. And you're a human being, you're not a robot, so relationship is a requirement. You were built as a man to be deeply relational with friends and with your wife and with your children. And if you're not doing those things and you're just going through life thinking that you're going to white knuckle it and just, keep working harder and get that next promotion and then it will all be okay, that's a lie. It's not going to work out for you. You need to have deep relationship with people, which requires some vulnerability, some honesty, and some openness. And when you do those things, you will be filled to a much higher level.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And you mentioned your military service, my friend. I know that you spent 4.5 years in the Army and you even
Mhm.
deployed to Afghanistan. So I'm curious to ask you, my friend, what did you learn about leadership yourself and dealing with other people during your time in the service, my friend?
Yeah, so the Army definitely has a very good handle on leadership, especially when it comes to leading organizations. I think I have some of the best training on the planet when it comes to how to understand people, help them work towards a common goal, and then ultimately build a team identity. Right, that's what the Army's really good at, is building what's called esprit de corps. And great leaders understand that it's not about them. They understand that leadership means I'm going to optimize everyone under my command or under my authority to be at their highest level. And, as a leader, what I learned very quickly was my successes pale in comparison to when I help my junior soldiers or my sergeants or whatever rise to their fullest potential and overcome hurdles for themselves. Those are the best moments from my experience. It has nothing to do with what I personally did. And so that's what great leaders do, is they recognize where people have their strengths and weaknesses, and they work with them to kind of make sure that the whole team is benefiting through everyone's individual contributions. What I learned a little bit too late in life was how to take those lessons and apply it outside of the Army, right? I was really good at doing it inside the context of the military. And then I essentially neglected all of this great training I had and how to actually apply it in my own home, right? And so what that looks like for men, I think we all struggle with this. It's very easy to dive into what we do for work, right? Maybe you're not in the military, that's fine. But we get very wrapped into, this is my job, this is the man I am, these are the things I do. And maybe you're a big leader in your company or at work or wherever it is, and then you come home and you do absolutely none of it. It should actually be the other way around. We should take this leadership stuff and prioritize it a lot more at home than we do outside in the world. And I think the reason for that is you get more accolades outside of your home, right? If you lead really well inside your four walls and you're providing all this great stuff to your family, no one's really going to see it but them, right? And so there's a temptation to do it better outside of the home because you're going to get awards and recognition and all that kind of stuff. But back to your initial question of what did I learn about leadership? I learned that it's universal, right? The Army is not the only place that you can be a leader. A business is not the only place that men can lead. Men can lead everywhere, and you don't even have to be the guy in charge, right? There is a concept called bottom-up refinement, where you may be a more junior person in your organization, but if you are a man that is working hard to improve and grow and improve your contributions, you can lead by doing things like this, like, hey, boss, I realize that we're doing this, this, and this, but if we change it to that, that, and that, we're going to save this much money this year and improve efficiency by that much. Okay, that's leadership. You're not the guy with the title, but you're certainly helping your organization produce better outcomes because you had the courage to step up and actually do it. Now, that's just one quick example. It's a fictional example, but you can do that kind of thing everywhere you are. You solve problems, you identify where dysfunction exists, and you root it out. That's what masculine leadership provides when we have the courage and confidence to start doing it. So that's one of the best things I learned from the Army, was that leadership is a skill that you can apply everywhere. You just have to adapt how you deliver it depending on your situation you're in. So for that very clear example, I'm not going to talk to my wife and daughter like I do to soldiers. I'm going to talk to them like my wife and daughter. However, the core values of, leading by example, having discipline, enforcing standards, I'm going to do those things in my home. It's just with a very different touch.
Yeah, and you actually led into my next question. I wanted to ask you about how fathers can really authentically connect with their children from an emotional standpoint. Because it's one thing to bring home a paycheck, and it's another thing to be a present parent. So, as a dad as a male figure in a child's life, what do you think it means to authentically show up?
Yeah. And that's a great distinction too. You don't have to be a dad to be a father figure, right? You could be a cousin, an uncle, you're volunteering somewhere. Men need to step up more and get involved with children. I think there's almost this disconnect that it's somehow weird if a genuinely good man is wanting to help children have better lives, right? So that needs to become more common. How can they connect? Well, one, you need to study them. You need to understand who you're talking to, right? Every kid is different. Every kid has different things that they're inspired by. They have natural giftings. For example, my daughter, she's very artistic. She's not very mathematical. Okay, so I already recognize that about her. She's going to be 9 soon. I'm not going to force her to try and become a mathlete because it's not a natural gifting to her, right? That would be my own projection, wanting her to achieve something for me, not because it's actually who she is. So instead, I do things like we buy her lots of art supplies. We have a whole table set up in the kitchen just for her to draw and color and create all these sculptures and all kinds of stuff because she's naturally good at it, and she's fulfilled by it, right? So I'm not going to force her out of something she's naturally good at and enjoys simply because it may not be my thing. So study your children if you're a father, and then if you're serving other kids, understand who they are and what their motivations are and natural affinities are first. When you do that understanding, it requires some humility. So you're naturally going to slow down and get out of your own head and what you want, and you're going to make it more about what they want and need. And then you need to provide that. That's what leaders do. You provide what someone else needs. You take the burden off of them and you help show them the way. So um, connecting with kids, it's not just talking to them, right? Communication is one thing, connecting is much different. It goes back to that emotional intelligence, it goes back to empathy and understanding. And you have to slow down, listen, study them, and then find out what actually they enjoy and start building connection on those things. Find common ground and then build relationship through that, right? And so with your kids, maybe they're really into a certain sport and that wasn't your thing. Okay, make it your thing now. You don't have to be the world's biggest fan of it, but it's going to matter because your son or daughter likes that thing, and now you can do it together. One other quick example that's really easy to do is like music or books or something like that. There's a specific album that my daughter loves to listen to. And it's actually by one of my favorite artists that she just happened to like. It's an acoustic album, and she wants to listen to it all the time. So we listen to it together all the time whenever we're driving around town. And just because we're running errands doesn't mean I can't be connecting with her. We'll talk about how much we love this song and which part of it and things like that. So just find little things where you can build relationship, because over time those little wins build up to a huge mountain of wins. And that's where real relationship happens. It's in the little things. It's not some monumental thing we do. It's not buying this big thing for them. It's the day-to-day consistency of connecting on common ground.
Yeah, and Georgia, I am a huge believer in the power of self-reflection, and I'm
Mhm.
curious to ask you about your transition away from the military. How did you find your passion and purpose after you left the service, and how do you think it's helped you sort of deal with the people that you deal with in corporate America today,
Mm.
my friend? How do you think those two things are interconnected?
Yeah, so I didn't actually handle it very well. My identity, because I had not really grown myself. I thought I had. I thought I had become a man. I hadn't really done the work I needed to do to kind of bury my past, put my childhood stuff where it belongs and actually step into the man that I was born to be. Um, my identity was wrapped in who I was in the Army. And it was an important thing. I'm very proud of what I did, but it should not be the only thing that defines me. This is a big trap a lot of men fall into. We let our profession become who we are, not something that we work towards. Now, don't take that the wrong way. Men should certainly work towards things. We are designed to build cover ground and create good things, right? So I want you to work hard. I want you to pursue your passions and your careers and be the best you can possibly be, but it should not come at the expense of your family and at other people or your own identity. It's something you contribute to, but it is not you. That center identity is hard to find because we've been conditioned that unless you go do something in the world big, you're worthless. And that's a lie, because I would argue it back to the relationship thing. If you foster really strong relationships, I don't care how much money you made. If you helped 5 people live an exceptional life because you were a figure for them when they needed it most, that's winning. That's a real legacy. I don't care how much money you made. Um, my identity was very wrapped up in the Army. I left the Army. I really struggled, and I kind of spiraled. All of my issues that I had not dealt with, I thought I had kind of just grown out of them, but they were really just down there, and I'd buried them. They all came to the surface, man. I, for many years, was not living the way that current George would really be all over that guy. He would be holding him accountable very heavily because I was not leading my family. I was not being good to my wife, and I made a lot of terrible mistakes. That said, I learned a lot through that process. So I wish I could take some things back, but the lessons I've learned, I'm very grateful for. And it's that identity thing. You cannot get so wrapped up in what you do for work and make that all that you are. You have to be a good man first, and then you are able to provide that service in whatever work you're doing. It's a big distinction. And I think most men don't get that. So I would encourage you to just reflect, if you're listening to this, where you are in that journey, and make sure that you're actually confident in who you really are, not just with what you do for work. But as it relates to kind of moving on from that, after I kind of started fixing my life and getting myself back together, I was doing fine in work in the corporate world. But I started to realize, like, hey, I wasn't really a good person, deep down, and I needed to fix a lot of things. Once I did that, a lot of those lessons I learned from the Army, I was able to start applying, right? It's a different purpose now, but leadership's universal, hard work, discipline, ethic, work ethic, those things all stick, right? So those transfer across the board. And as I grew as a man, I learned to have more patience and understanding, right? So it's very easy to get worked up over something, or someone sends that email and you're like, man, I already told you 7 times, and you can get real angry about it. Well, having that patience and understanding, just be like, hey, just calmly remind them, build bridges, don't burn them. That patience has been a very valuable tool for me moving forward. But it took me a while. I'll be very transparent. It took me a while to really feel like I had left the Army and a piece of me didn't die. It was definitely a very hard thing. And if you're a service member listening to this right now, I would really encourage you to start reevaluating where your identity really lies, because one day the military will end for you. You're going to have to leave for some reason, or you retire, and they'll move on without you. And it's not because they're mean, it's because they have to. There's still a mission to do, right? So you need to make sure that you're building relationships and having systems outside of the military to continue to rely upon, because when you're gone, man, and they're done with you.
Yeah, it's the same with life. I always tell people to live in the moment, because a life is, the timetable of life isn't forever. So you have to live in the moment of maximizing your moment of difference, don't you?
That's right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, being present.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And I know that part of your passion and purpose now, you're the founder of Elite Sentinel Coaching, my friend, where you help men really dive into their authentic masculinity, my friend. Once again, forge leaders and build legacies, my friend. So tell me about this new group you've created and this new venture, my friend, because it's a unique concept, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's too unique necessarily. It's definitely needed. I needed me 10 years ago. I needed this 10 to 15 years ago. And I think, my life would be drastically different. I would have been a much better husband and father. I would have performed better at work. And then even in the military, right? Now I'm in the National Guard. I've had the chance to, on a part-time basis, continue to interact with soldiers and pay it forward. If I would have learned these lessons a long time ago, I would have been better at everything. Because I would have understood people better. I would have had more presence and to be able to hold space for them and to build those real connections, as opposed to kind of just playing the game. And that's a big difference. So Elite Sentinel Coaching, what it's about. Men today are hurting, right? I'm going to give you an acronym. Most men today are salty. They're stressed, angry, lonely, tired, and yearning for a lot more. And it's, again, because of isolation. We're not authentic about who we really are and what we're struggling with, and we're afraid and terrified to share that with any other men, because we're afraid of judgment or ridicule. And in reality, we're all struggling with similar things, man. We may have different lines of work and different situations that are pressing on us, but most of those feelings and the fears and the self narratives of I'm not enough, and if I don't work hard enough or I don't make more money, my family won't love me, and all those kinds of things, most men deal with that. So what do we do about it? This for me started, it was a huge wake up call for me that the direction of my life was not the way it needed to be going, and I needed to make a shift. And along that way, I realized that I can help others make this shift too. And so what we're building here with Elite Sentinel is training men in the authentic ways to serve as a real man, to be a real leader in every situation of your life, in your work, in your home, in your endeavors, in where you volunteer, right? There's a lack of real men who aren't doing things for their own personal glory, but actually to better the world. And in order to be that man, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of unconditioning what the world has taught you. There's a lot of truth and values that we've walked away from in our modern society that men need to get back to. And another reason for that too is most of us weren't raised with rites of passage. When did you become a man? What defined when you actually arrived at manhood versus being a boy? We don't do that for boys anymore. There's nothing to tell them that they are now a man. And that's a huge part of the journey. And so for most of us, we're figuring it out now in our 20s and in our 30s or our 40s. And that's too late, right? We should have learned this back when we were teenagers. So long story short, what we're trying to accomplish is to give men the tools to actually show up in life and feel equipped and confident to do so. and just an example of that in marriage, I think most men are terrified to disagree with their wives. That's not strength. You're not being good to her just because you're, trying to defer to her all the time. She needs a man. She needs a leader. She needs someone to make the hard decisions and not put that burden off on her. So we've been so pounded into submission by the modern way. Men are just feeling stuck and lonely and depressed because they're not actually filling the purpose that they were designed to fill, and that's leadership. And in order to lead truly, you have to love and care about other people. It's not for personal glory. So Elite Sentinel, we teach these things. We also teach a lot of leadership qualities that I've learned from the military. There's a lot of detailed instruction over planning, planning processes, how to mitigate risk and things like that. And then there's a lot of focus on legacy and brotherhood and how those things are actually some of the most powerful tools to help you as a man today, not just build for tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, you bring up an interesting point, and my next question was how men can show up as authentic partners in a marriage, but I think you already partially answered it. So I will transition the question this way because I want your perspective on the whole idea of men sort of standing in their space of purpose and conviction because it's one thing to have a stance on the subject or an opinion on an issue, but it's another thing to really dive into having elite conversations that really make a difference, my friend. So how do you think men can have conversations that really move the needle of progress forward?
Yeah, it's just connecting locally, right? Building some actual friendships, and that stat of over 70% of men don't have one close friend. So you have lots of acquaintances, but you don't actually have a guy that really knows you. That's a problem. We need to fix that, and that's on us, right? That's on you. If you're listening to this and you're like, "Oh man, I don't have any close friends." Okay, time to start. It's going to take some courage. It's going to take a little bit of courageous transparency, is what I like to call it, because vulnerability seems to be a dirty word for men. But you're going to have to find one of those acquaintances that you kind of know and just put it out there. Hey, man, look, I really don't have any very close friends. I respect you a lot. I think I'd like to spend some more time with you. Can we make it a priority to meet once or twice a week, at least over the next month? And I just want to see if, maybe we can get to know each other a lot better and help each other through life. It can be that simple, right? It doesn't have to be some grand thing. Just start being honest, right? Like that's step one. You have to be honest to that person. Like, hey man, I like you, I respect you, and I'd like to be better friends. Okay. That's a little bit courageous. It's a little scary, but if you don't do that, what's the alternative? You're just going to be stuck at arm's length. You're going to continue to suffer the way you are right now, feeling totally alone, totally isolated, overwhelmed. So in order to start having real conversations about how we actually change things, men need to start connecting face to face, one-on-one. And when you get comfortable kind of doing that with one guy that you really trust and respect, you'll start to grow in your confidence to start pouring that out to more people who maybe aren't quite as receptive to it. And then once we get more comfortable with that stuff, we can start influencing others to be courageous as well, to connect and find common ground, to build better results for everyone, as opposed to just sticking to party lines and pointing fingers and blaming others, right? Real men build connection across lines. They find ways to unite people. They amplify human potential wherever they go. Little boys stay and hide in the shadows, and they blame others for their problems. So unfortunately, men, there's no one coming to save you, really. There's no one's going to knock on your door and say like, okay, let me get your whole life together for you. No, you're going to have to take the first step. Along the journey, people will present themselves to you, and they will aid you, and they will help you. And most people are excited to see someone trying to get better, and they will gladly give a willing hand. I mean, that's my own story. There's so many people who have helped me get to where I am, but I had to make the first moves. I had to start stepping in that direction first with a little bit of a leap of faith. And then these people started presenting themselves because they saw that I was serious about changing my life. So men, the ball is in your court. The responsibility is on you to start changing your story today. Wherever you come from, whatever has happened to you, I have empathy for those things. And a lot of it is probably unjust. However, if we sit and just constantly stay, oh, that happened to me and it's unfair and blah, 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 nothing will change for you. And I'm sorry that you had that past you had. If it's painful, I'm sorry. It shouldn't have been that way, but we have to change it today because other people will need you down the road too. And maybe you're a father right now. You have little humans who need you today. So it's time to start changing that narrative, change the story today. And it'll be hard, but it's going to be a much better outcome for you and everyone else around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, selfishly, I want to ask you your perspective on how you think inclusion and creating a competitive advantage are interconnected. Because, buddy, I talk to businesses all the time about hiring folks with disabilities to help sort of close the gap with the labor shortage, but I also tell them about the competitive advantage that it can bring to a business if they're willing to diversify their perspectives, buddy. And this is a personal passion project of mine, my friend, because I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. And I found out at Georgia at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the
Mhm.
duration of my life without assistance. But I always tell businesses that inclusion is the gateway to independence. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how inclusion and creating a competitive advantage are interconnected.
Yeah. Well, so one, like we're having this conversation right now, right? Your disability doesn't limit that. We're having real conversation about real challenges and real issues. And so, I think again, it comes back to humility and desiring to build relationship as opposed to solely being focused on, outcomes and status and all that kind of stuff. So now there are realities too, right? Certain jobs, you're certainly not going to be able to do given your, disability. However, that doesn't mean that you can't serve somewhere, right? And so that's again back to real leadership. You're finding ways to optimize everyone's fullest potential to help them be their best. And so whatever organization you're working in, recognizing that regardless of someone's background or who they are and what they have, it's your job to help grow them to a better point. And then it's their job to be willing, right? So it's a two-way street. But when we're in those situations, it doesn't matter who the person is, it matters where their hearts are. Okay. If your heart is fully in it, you can produce better outcomes. Again, there are realities in that, there needs to be definitely qualifications, especially when you're talking about business, right? But if the goal isn't to make profit, I think our aperture should open significantly for including everyone who's willing, right? If they are truly willing to work hard and contribute in what way they can, then we need to make that open offer to make that reality, right? When money isn't on the line, we can all add value. There is a perspective, there is something to give. And again, that's where real leadership comes into play because a real leader recognizes no one person has all the answers. No one person has all the skills. It does require teamwork. It requires outside perspectives and you take it under advisement. And so to your point, men need to do that more often. And it's again, locally, right? There's no massive movement we're going to start. There's no government coming to save us. No politician is going to make it happen for us. It has to start where you are in your local community today. Maybe you go to a church, maybe you have a school group, maybe it's a sports team, for your kids or whatever. Find something and provide that leadership to start making that community grow in a way that helps everyone who's within it or wants to join it, right? And there's a lot of, implied tasks here where you're going to have to kind of figure it out on your own, but that's leadership, man. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. And we should be helping others find their ways to be their best selves. Okay. But again, coming back, you have to be that man first. So you have to do the inner work. You have to grow yourself and improve yourself to be able to provide that outwardly to other people. And that's, I think, why we're having such a struggle with this and these topics is because most people are so selfish. They're so caught up in themselves they don't even have the capacity to think of someone else or have any empathy for someone else because they are so stuck with blinders on to their own problems. And we have to change that narrative. It starts with your personal development and personal growth, and then you can start helping others do the same.
Yeah, and George, tell me, how do you think emotional courage and the ability to adapt to change are interconnected? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's deeply tied. And again, this is one of the most courageous things men can do, real strong men can do, is to lead in emotions. So most people are so scared of judgment or having someone disagree with them that they just shut everything off and they create a gap between each other. Men can kind of fill that gap, and they can lead through emotions and connection to kind of break the ice for everyone else to have permission to start being honest and open and sharing their feelings, right? Now, how does that relate to growth and change? It's everything, right? Because when you start embracing your emotions, understanding them, and then having healthy ways of dealing with them, you're going to connect with people to a much deeper level, right? So I think a lot of men think the answer is to be super robotic and just shut everything down, never cry, never get angry, and just like bottle it all up. Well, that's not human. Human beings have emotions. They're going to hit you, and the more attuned you become to them, the stronger you become, because then you can adapt to each situation where each person needs it, and then make wise decisions and lead with strength and love. And that's where change starts to happen, because again, it starts with that human connection, and then it starts being a heart change. It's not just something you're doing. And when we change ourselves at that base level inside ourselves, it's that long-term shift that starts to make big impacts outside of just our personal lives.
Yeah, and George, tell me, how do you think men can learn from stumbles and making mistakes? Because in some instances, my friend, I think making mistakes can be your best teacher, and I wonder your thoughts there as well.
Yeah, so failure is, I think, misunderstood by most people. We get so caught up in succeeding that we don't realize that in reality, we're going to fail and mess up a lot more than we ever succeed. And that's kind of by design. We learn the best lessons when we don't achieve something. And it doesn't feel good, but it's very useful. Some of the best lessons I've learned are through times that I have failed. And we need to get comfortable with that. Fail early and fail often, and then learn from those things. The man who succeeds a lot isn't the one who never failed. He's the one who learned the fastest. And so I like to use the term of like training scars. If you cut yourself making a mistake and it scars over, you're going to remember like, oh, okay, don't do that thing again, right? So that concept applies here, where if we fail a lot and realize, okay, where to shift and how to change, we're going to grow and achieve eventually a lot more to a higher degree. If you're so afraid of failure that you play it safe and you never step outside of your little box and never try to achieve more, you're always going to be stuck where you are, because you're not going to learn those hard lessons you needed to learn along the way. And if it's not a life and death situation, failure isn't fatal. It's just a learning opportunity. And again, it won't feel good to fail in the moment, but in the long run, it'll feel much better, because you will have gained strength and knowledge and wisdom and ability and a lot of these things that tie into actually having success. Success is honestly just the result of everything before it. It's not something you achieve, really. It's an incremental thing that just happens when you've put in all this work that no one else sees. So we have to be comfortable with failure. And men, you have to give yourself some grace when you do fail. If it's really not a life and death situation, if it's not the end of the world, we need to treat it as such. It's not the Super Bowl, right? You didn't lose the world's biggest thing. If it's a smaller one, we need to realize that, okay, hey, you know what? That sucked, but let's move on. Next rep, next thing I can do. Okay. Those are the people who succeed the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, what do you think it means to be an all-star husband?
An all-star husband. Yeah. So this is something I learned way too late in life. And for men, it's the most important thing you're going to do, even more so than your kids. And I'll clarify that, because your children want to see their mom and dad be deeply in love. They are ingrained from birth to expect that from their parents. That's the number one biggest source of safety for children, is their parents' relationship. So if you have a very strong marriage, it inherently benefits your kids first. So that's a big distinction. A lot of parents prioritize the kids over their marriage. That's a big mistake. You are now putting the kids in charge, and you're not putting your marriage first, and you're not leading. So the most important thing you can do as a man is to love your wife exceptionally well and to be a great husband, because by extension, you're going to have to be a great father. The things you have to do to be a good husband make you a better father anyway. So it's not, it's not like either or. It's a mutually supportive situation. The reason men need to be all-star husbands is because the benefits of this extend far beyond just your marriage. right? Your wife will now blossom. She will not have all this pressure on her, all this anxiety and stress and anger. She will be more free to be her fullest self, all the lives that she can touch because she is loved well and covered well by her husband. What makes you an all-star husband? So it makes you a great man, right? You have to, there's 4 pillars of authentic manhood. You have to be a king, you have to lead. There's the warrior, you have to protect, which is also in the emotional sense. And then there's the mentor, you have to teach and train, which means you also have to learn and grow yourself. And then there's the 4th pillar, which is the lover. And the loving pillar is the one where we talk about empathy, compassion, understanding. And if you're not doing these things, if you're missing one of these pillars, you can't possibly be a good husband to your wife because you're only showing up as 50 or 75% of a man. You're not 100% of a man yet. And she needs a man.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, I've got one more topic I want to talk to you about before I ask you about your podcast and your own legacy, my friend, and that's the concept of resilience. And I'll use myself as an example. As I told you, I was born not being able to walk, but when I also graduated college, George, I wanted to become a sports reporter. So when I graduated college, I went on job interviews with news directors, and for 10 consecutive times, my friend, I heard a version of Kevin, you have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for the field of journalism, but because of your disability, we view you as a liability. So what I did, George, out of college, because I really wanted to pursue the journalism thing, I volunteered for 4 straight years at a local television station without a paycheck money, and through my advocacy, I was able to host a pilot program showing the benefits of hiring folks that look like me. And I also was able to work with our provincial governments here in Ontario to appoint a special master to help hire more people within the provincial government. And then finally, I was able to lead the province's first online job matching portal for folks with disabilities and employers to get connected. And I share those stories with you because I had to learn my own sort of story of resilience. And I always tell people, they always tell me that I'm an inspiring person. And I tell them that resilience is the answer to the test once adversity strikes, my friend. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the concept of resilience and what that really means, my friend.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that part of your story. That really motivates me because that's it. That's resilience right there. And you had a mission and a drive, and you didn't let adversity stop you from getting to the place you wanted to do. And look at how much good you've done that far exceeds yourself, right? This is everything I've been talking about. You exemplified all those things. So resilience. I think resilience is a byproduct of all of these other skills, right? It's not one thing that gives you resilience. It's having a lot of these things. And so that's where if you're really lacking in that area, it's a little bit of a process. You're not going to magically go get resilience, right? If you're always emotionally triggered by things, it's going to take some deep work. It's going to take some consistency and effort, and you have to commit to yourself to make those things happen. Resilience is essential, though. There's no way to get through life and be any kind of success in any matter, whether it's being a husband, a father, a friend, a business owner, a business worker, any of that kind of stuff. If you're not resilient, you're never going to achieve anything, because the first time something hits you hard, you're going to get knocked down and never get back up. And life is hard. Another element to building resilience is having a brotherhood, right? It gets a lot easier to overcome all these obstacles when you've got a whole team of people around you willing to help and willing to listen and willing to provide advice and counsel and guidance. And you don't have to bear all that weight alone. They're going to help you process through that stuff. And I do it all the time. I've got a whole group of men that I rely on. When I'm struggling with something, I call them immediately. I'm texting them. We're sharing stories all the time, every single day. Like this conversation that we're having on this podcast, I talk like this to the building friendships. It's about this too. It builds resilience within you because you learn the tools from other people's experience and their support to overcome things on a day-to-day basis. Kevin, in your story, I'm sure you had people cheering you on, helping you get through those hard times and helping you get to the point you wanted to be at, right? You didn't just do it all by yourself. I'm certain there were people that helped you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the old saying is if you want to go one way, go by yourself. But if you want to go far, go together. So it's all about creating community, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Building real relationship is a huge factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And George, my last question for you, buddy, is to tell me about your podcast, my friend,
Sure.
and your own individual legacy and how you want that to be defined.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that opportunity to share about it. So the Present Fathers podcast, we've been a podcast for 2 years now, and it's solely focused on helping men be better fathers. And the way we do that is we interview men from all different walks of life who are fathers, and also some experts, right? People, doctors and stuff who have written, books on fatherhood. But we want to give men tools and practical resources to be better husbands and fathers. And through our podcast, we learn through other men's stories in real time, what they've gone through, what they've overcome, how they did it. And it gives men practical wisdom and advice to go show up and be better dads. And the reality too is a lot of these feelings we have of, am I doing good enough, or am I doing all I can do? Am I a good dad? You're going to realize very quickly through hearing all these stories that you're not the only one. We all struggle with very similar things, and it is a very hard and difficult journey, but it is the most valuable journey we're going to go on, because the efforts we make today and pour into our children creates legacy. And so for me, that's my number one legacy. Is my wife and I both come from homes of divorce, lots of dysfunction, lots of, all kinds of stuff you don't want to deal with, emotional traumas and that kind of thing. And the fact that we've celebrated over 10 years of marriage now for our daughter, and she won't ever have to face those things in the same way that we had to. That's my legacy. I don't care what else happens in this world. The fact that I'm going to give my daughter every opportunity to be a healthy, whole adult, to go into her own life and hopefully marry a great man and build a strong family together. That's number one for me. Everything after that is just doesn't matter nearly to the same degree. And if more men would focus on that, I think we'd have a much better world. So I hope my example can help inspire you. And that's the final point I want to make. You asked earlier, what makes me special? Nothing makes George special. I'm just a guy, man. I'm as average as can be. I just work really hard. I've learned a lot of hard lessons, and I have incredible people around me. I am the product of other people's wisdom, other people's teaching and mentoring and guidance. And because I was humble enough to just take that in and grow, I've gotten to this place. So none of us are actually that special. No one is actually that good. Every man needs a team around him. No man should fight alone. So that's where I am today, Kevin. And I hope that answered your question well enough. But if you're interested in what we're doing, you can reach out to me on social media. You can look us up. We're on every platform. So it's either the Present Fathers podcast, or if you're looking for me specifically, it's just george.hayworth on Instagram. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, man.
Fabulous, George. It's always great to level up and become smarter by talking to interesting and thought-provoking people, and you're certainly within that category, my friend. So I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this morning and for being here. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, man. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And to all the men out there, I know it's hard work, but it's well worth it, gentlemen. So just take the next right step.